Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's Black Hills Information Security webcast. My name is Jason Blanchard. I'm the Content Community Director here at Black Hills Information Security. And today we got Hal and Paul joining us for a new webcast on detection engineering. So I've heard, and I always ask, like, what do you want to talk about? How do you want to talk? When do you want to talk? And all these things. And you guys came back with like false positive, truth, false, benign. And I was like, okay, I don't understand. And so if I don't understand, there's a good chance that there's 1,240 other people who may not understand. And so today's webcast could be incredibly beneficial for people to understand like how you do the detection engineering work that you do, Hal and Paul, in our SOC. So if you ever need SOC services, you know where to find us. You can reach out to Black Hills. And if you're like, I thought you were pen testing and we're like red teaming, we are, and we provide SOC services. And the reason why is because we have this perspective of being attackers, of knowing how things get attacked, and so that we can bring that perspective into our SOC. And we also test our SOC all the time to make sure it actually works. That's the active part of it. All right, so Paul and Hal, I'm going to turn it over to you. You guys are going to give the webcast. We'll show back up at the end for Q&A. And to those of you joining us in Discord, thank you so much for being here. If you're watching the recording, hello from the past, and thank you so much for watching the recording. Hopefully you'll join us again, join us in the future for live streams. And with that, Hal and Paul, it's all yours. I'll be backstage in case you need anything. And to everyone that joined us, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Jason. All right, detection engineering and alert disposition. So Paul and I wanted to basically bring this forward to help talk about detection engineering process and how important alert disposition is and the overall way to measure your detections and just try to gauge how well you're doing from a detection perspective. So I'm Hal Denton, right? I'm part of the BHIS SOC. I've done several different things throughout the years. From you basically name the role, I basically have done it from help desk to forensics to incident response to hunting, intel, all those good things. But lately, I've been focusing on detection engineering. Also, a husband, a dad, and a human. I guess part of one of my hobbies is basically just trying to be a cool dad. And what I say by that is basically just trying to emulate a bandit from Bluey. So randomly, my kid will might ask me to do something silly, and of course, I'm going to do it, and I'm going to own it. So also, I have a shameless plug for another webcast that I'm giving on May 8th. It's about a tool I created called Echo Threat, and it's a way to expedite some of your detection creation process. Also, as mentioned earlier, I do have a future class. It's called Detection Engineering Unleashed. Should probably be out by the end of the year. And I think this is a great opportunity to ask you guys, like, what do you want to see content-wise in that? Because I do have about 7 modules pretty much designed, and I have tons of labs that are associated to all those modules. But if I'm missing something key that you have high interest in, please like share that in Discord, and I'm happy to read over it. And if it's not already included in my class, I probably will slide it in there if I can. Paul?
All right. So I'm Paul Lammers. I've been at Black Hills for about a year, 6 months as an intern, 6 months now full time. I've got 4 kids. I do support special needs groups. I've actually got several special needs kids. I love to learn. I love to teach. My current hyper focus is 3D printing. It's becoming a bit of an obsession. On the right side, you can see a bunch of stuff that I've done and certs that I have or had. Pretty much all of them are expired now, and none of that matters. I'm glad that y'all are showing up to actually listen to us.
Yeah, funny thing is that I do 3D printing as well, and I didn't know that me and Paul are actually Bamboo Labs brothers, right?
Yeah.
So we've been like talking about the things that we've been making for our kids back and forth, and just how awesome it is to just kind of make random toys or fidget toys like out of the blue. Yeah, just like that. So Bamboo Brother Labs for
Yeah.
life.
There we go.
All right, so we kind of wanted to do like a little bit of a hook in the beginning just to try to have some fun with it. Because, typically the talking about alert disposition is really like a 10-15 minute conversation. So to try to make it a little bit fun, we wanted to label it as Detection Engineering's Hot Dog Paradox. And when we talk about the hot dog paradox in itself, like what is that? Well, it's basically right around the corner is summer, where we're in spring, and we're gonna start dusting off all of our grills and pull it up and light it up, and we're gonna fry some meat on there and have people over. But before we do all that, we have to go to the grocery store and we have to pick all the different types of items that we want to grill. So one of those things are typically always hot dogs, and then you have to get the hot dog buns associated with that. So the hot dogs typically come in packs of 10, and then your buns come in packs of 8. So what do I do with all these weird numbers? They don't make any sense because I have 10 hot dogs and I got 8 buns. What am I doing with that? So the math just doesn't math right. So when it comes to detection engineering, we heavily rely on alert disposition to help give us an idea of our quality of detections. Like how's that detection doing in its lifespan that through when it's been released into production. And there seems to be a lot of confusion around terminology when we talk about alert disposition. And we're trying to want to clear that up because if the team that you're working with or your organization doesn't have it well defined, it's going to cause confusion for your analysts, and in the end, it's going to skew your metrics for your detections. So let's break down detection engineering a little bit. So that role in itself is basically a individual or a team of individuals that come together and they just looking to emulate or build a detection that will identify malicious behaviors and provide additional protections for an organization. Traditionally when we talk about like detection engineering, we think about some of the previous roles that are out there. I personally align with the security engineering role, and just because they have a little bit more experience traditionally from like an IDS perspective, because you're basically creating detections there, but also like from firewalls, basically you create all the rules to allow information in and out of your networks. But when we talk about detection engineering, the role is focused on the content to detect malicious behaviors. So I spent a lot of time in the past 2 weeks talking to previous organizations and people I worked with in intel communities and such things like that, just to get a vibe of like, where does it fall in their organization? And it really just depends. Like that's like kind of the standard answer when it comes to security. It just depends. And a lot of it has to do with size of the organization. Like how many members of the team do you have? What's your focus? All those different variables that could come into play that will help define the structure for your team. So when we talk about detection engineering, it includes lots of research, data analytics, and DevOps. When I say DevOps, is basically trying to follow the software development type of role when we talk about detection as code. Um, so one other idea that I always like to pitch, and it's something I try to implement previously at another organization, because I don't want anybody to be pigeonholed into a particular type of role, is basically a concept I call the pod concept. And the pod concept is basically makes up different areas of the organization or the SOC, right? So you have your threat intel people, you have your hunters, you have your triage people, you have your engineers or system administrators. You have all these different units. And this all depends on your size of your teams, and this might not apply to everybody, but if it's possible, we talk about career progression and career retention for your staff, because there's a lot of people that want security, folks, and a good program that you could try to implement is this pod concept. When there's 2 seniors or a senior person that's always in that pod, and you take your junior folks and you rotate them to each pod, so they get exposed to all these different types of elements. And this really drives home to me because I have 20 years experience, but I had to be stuck in particular roles for periods of time before I could get exposed to something else. So if we could basically push the ball forward and basically implement these types of concepts, it would basically allow people to grow so much faster. So it's just an idea, and if you guys take up that type of idea, more power to you. I'll owe you a beer or whatever drink you like. So in detection engineering, there's basically a life cycle that we have to follow. And that life cycle is not really clearly defined. So this is something I threw together for our team and how we kind of operate around detection engineering. So it comes down to 7 phases: the collection, the research, the validation, the verification, the release, the maintain, and measurement of your detection, why it's been released out into production. So I'm going to go into all of those individually. I know we crammed in a lot of material, so I'm going to go a little bit fast, but I just want to make sure I cover all the points because I'm basically building the backdrop, the storyline before we get up to alert disposition. Okay, collection, right? This is the very entry point when we talk about detections. This is basically just the collection of ideas or the inspiration that basically allows us to think about what we could do to detect malicious behaviors, right? And could be anybody on the team. So it could be analysts, it could be hunters, it could be responders, our intel folks, our engineers, red teamers, even stakeholders, right? So this is just an idea. Like, okay, some examples when we talk about this is, okay, emerging threats. Stakeholders like CISOs and VPs, all those important people are going to have concerns. So how do we make sure we address that? So we have to have that idea to start that production. When we talk about another idea or forms of inspiration, we talk annual breach reports or intel reports. Those come out every year. Those guys put out, or girls put out all this work into developing their report. And it's a really good source of information when we talk about, the MITRE ATT&CK TTPs. They always typically align those TTPs to MITRE ATT&CK. So that's like rich information that we can draw our inspiration from. If for those folks that have been in the Intel community, there's this term called B2B, which is business to business. And that's basically when you're a part of an ISAC, which is an information sharing and analysis center, where you group up with similar type of organizations that basically produce or provide some type of service or product, and you share your intel back and forth with one another. So when I say intel, it's like, what have you seen from a threat perspective? And what have you seen from a threat perspective? And you exchange those TTPs. Because typically, if you have this similar vector, normally threat actors will target those same identities to get that same type of intellectual property. Other forms of inspiration or vendor blogs. I mean, I know of a particular vendor, maybe Black Hills Information Security, that has a really good blog, so you might want to check that one out. Also, deeper engagements, right? That's the ground truth. These are the folks that go in and drop in for organizations to, basically push out these threat actors. And as they're doing that, they're collecting all those TTPs or those indicators of compromise and those behaviors that are around that breach. So that input is very vital when we talk about ideation and creation. And also a missed opportunity. Well, it's not necessarily missed, but basically when red teams are performing their actions and we don't have a detection. So basically we have a gap in our detection coverage. Red teamers, pen testers, that's another form of ideation that we can use to basically use that as an idea for a new detection and basically increase our coverage.
If you can get into a purple team, that's a fantastic point to cut in there and do those, see what you missed and have them replay.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely, Paul. So as we move on from the collection and the inspiration, basically we're going to start our research. When we talk about research, we have to familiarize ourselves with the behaviors of the attack. How do those work? Identify the telemetry that's associated with that type of attack. And we have to ask questions to ourselves. Do we even have this telemetry? Right? Because, if we don't have that telemetry, it might be a non-starter. And I say that because we might not be collecting that telemetry because it's verbose in logging. And when you start multiplying that across hosts, the ingest for your SIM or whatever your alerting mechanism or collection mechanism is going to be multiplied in magnitudes, and you got to pay for that. So is it really worth the squeeze to onboard this new telemetry for this one simple detect? And that's the things that you kind of have to balance when you're considering new types of detections, especially when it's a new data source. So I picked this GIF here because Peter, he's just crazy. So in my mind, when he's doing this, he's like, I'm going to basically take a shower and wash my clothes at the same time. So, I mean, that was a good idea to save time, but not necessarily. So after our research phase, we're basically going into validation. Validation is basically, when we're starting to get a little bit more confidence in how to approach this type of detection or behavior that we're trying to detect on. So we're going to write various different versions of detection logic to help zone in on or hone in what we're trying to capture. Right? And when we do that, we do basically a historical look back. So when I say back testing, that's basically looking at historical data or historical telemetry to identify how well the logic is going to work. And this gives you an opportunity to define what type of detection type you're going to use. So it could, depending on the sim and what options you have, an example is basically like a threshold rule. A threshold rule is basically stacking data and pulling statistics off of that telemetry to basically come to a conclusion that this is probably malicious. So that's just one type. You could do simple matching, which is just string matching basically. And then there's also correlation rules. Correlation rules are a little bit more, I'm not gonna say difficult, but it's looking at multiple types of things to make it fire. So that's one of the things that we're going to be looking at during the backtesting part of it, and looking for ways to create exceptions that we think these are normal and this shouldn't be included in the output. So let's see here. After our validation is basically our verification phase. And verification phase is basically in the short version is basically just making sure that the detection fires in your sim, right? And there's different ways you can do that. You can use simulated logs, and that's basically what the webcast on May 8th is about. Is that tool is basically I'm injecting logs in our sim to basically simulate this behavior. And burning in is basically another way to test out your detection that it works. And how you do that is, depending on your sim setup, you just basically don't have alerting enabled. So it's not sending off alerts to your handlers or your responders. Is basically in production, looking at the telemetry coming in, and it will fire passively that you can actually go look at the log and see if this is going to be worthwhile and is it going to burden my SOC. And that's the things we want to avoid is, alert fatigue. We want to bring high value detects up front so people can investigate them. Trigger script. Trigger script is basically another test type, and that test type is, you can think of it just like Atomic Red Team, right? There's a framework there to basically fire off a bunch of scripts that are looking at specific tactics and techniques, and basically as you're doing your detection lifecycle, you can create your own detection or trigger script to feed into that framework if you choose. And the other thing, the verification, and I like this because when we think about our red teamers and our pen testers, they're basically out there testing the boundaries of our organization, and they will basically fire your detects. So they're actually another layer of verification. All right, so release. This is right before we go into production when we take our detection. So one of the key things I want to harp on when we talk about release, we have to have peer review. When I say peer review, you need somebody else to look over your logic, your outputs, your testing, all that to make sure it is square. So we don't want to push anything out that's going to disrupt operations. So we got to have the documentation associated with that. What does this detection even mean? How do responders respond to it? Give them tips and tricks so as they're doing the investigation, they can go look at that. So we're not just throwing things over the fence. We gotta arm them with the tools that they need to go after this type of stuff. And some of the things that we want to classify as before we go into release is, what's the impact? Like, how is this behavior impact this organization? When I talk about impact, we think about the MITRE ATT&CK framework. We talk about all the tactics. So from left to right, the deeper that you go to the right, the worse off you are. That's the impact. Because basically, if data is being exfilled, I mean, basically game is already over. That's high impact to that organization. They lost data already. So when you think about severities and classification and priorities, the further you go to the right, the worse off it is. So we want to stop further up that chain as much as possible so we can get after it before they get to do the damage. I think I covered everything there. What do you think, Paul?
Yeah, that's exactly it.
Okay.
As far release, just it's out there and you start working on it. Alerts start flowing.
Yeah, man. Okay. All right. So after a detection is released into production, is collecting telemetry and is about to fire or could fire, it will eventually fire at some point. And I talked about validation, verification. That's how we basically try to give us some good idea if this is going to work. The problem is when we go into production, environments change. When they change, basically that introduce a variable that we didn't account for when we did the initial creation of the detection. So that requires tuning. So when we do tuning, we want to get rid of those false positives that our triage folks are getting. And then, depending what's introduced to the organization, it could also make us want to make an improvement to the detection overall to basically make it even better. So this is when we think about maintaining, you might release it, but the game's not over. You got to maintain that thing for the entire lifespan it's out.
Everything
All right.
changes all the time.
Everything changes, man. So we gotta make sure we keep that into account. It's not a set and forget type of thing.
Yep.
All right. So we kind of talked about the detection engineering lifecycle. There's one phase I didn't talk about. I'll talk about it later, but I'm just trying to build that whole backstory. All right. So now that we have a detection in production, and we're about to simulate something got triggered. So in the alert life cycle, yes, I know it's another life cycle that we have to put in our arsenal of things to know. But generically, there's data or telemetry that comes in, and then it gets ingested by your SIM or your alerting apparatus. It gets enriched by lookup tables for like ASNs or who is information, whatever you can dream of, you can enrich it. But if it matches the detection logic, it's going to alert. So when it alerts, it's going to go in front of somebody, or depending on how you have things set up, you might have a SOAR in front of it to do some initial tackling or blocking or what have you. But in the end, it's going to come to a human. The human has to make the determination. Is this malicious or not? And depending on that, there could be some remediation involved with that. Could be like, oh man, now we got to fire up the IRR life cycle. We got to get after this. Or is basically going to kick off a tuning or a maintenance type of request to fix that detect if it's not malicious, right? So the main thing is what's malicious and is it not malicious? This is kind of like the key things that we need to think about. So alert disposition, I kind of already talked to it a little bit, but I want to make it clear. At the end of an investigation, a determination is made on the alert. Was it malicious? That's basically what we're trying to determine. So there could be the conversation of, well, what does that mean, malicious? Well, that makes us want to look up terms and definitions. So the first place I go is typically to NIST. Like, okay, let's see what they have in their dictionary. The closest thing I can find is malicious cyber activities. And that's basically saying activities other than those authorized by or in accordance with US law. So I'm kind of a stickler when it comes to like terms and terminology. So the fact that they have this US law in there makes me laugh because I always go to a lawyer type of dictionary to look up words to because they're very when I say lawyers are very condensed in their language and every word that they use means something. So I looked up malicious in a law dictionary. Evincing malice, done with malice, and an evil design, willful. Okay, That's a lot of stuff to unpack there. Like, first off, me and Paul were talking about this. I'm like, what the heck is an fencing?
I've never heard that word before in my
Yeah.
life.
And so we started looking into this, and it's like reveal the presence of. Okay, and then it's basically reveal the presence of malice. Okay, well let's double check what malice is. The intention or desire to do evil, right? To do evil. I mean, when we talk about that, it's basically disrupting operations of our organization. And this kind of ties back to the malicious cyber activity definition that NIST defines. When we talk about impair the confidentiality, the integrity, or the availability of computers. That's basically the standard CISP terminology when we talk about operations. You know, is it available? Do we have integrity? Do we have the confidentiality around this? I forgot what the other one, the opposite side is like dad. I don't remember. It's like disrupt.
Oh,
Yeah. We don't have to go into that, but yeah.
One time.
Yeah, dad is the basically the opposite. So also just to try to give a different look for malicious activity, companies will have their own policies. So when we talk about policies like a computer use policy or internet usage policy, and when those are in play, the company itself, when somebody's breaching one of those policies, in their mind, that could be something malicious. So when we talk about insider threat programs and such things like that, in their mind, and if employees breaking these, they are also malicious. So that's just kind of a different way to look at it as well. So let's start getting into the guts of what this is all really about. So the core quadrants. This is kind of the breakdown of anatomy, and the best way me and Paul could think of this is let's just basically simplify it.
The
Snap
quadrants
some
of
lines.
dispositions.
Yep, these are the dispositions, right? So let's snap some lines here, and let's break it by, does it alert and does it not alert? Okay, so if it's alerting a true positive, which is malicious, and then there's false positive, which basically needs, a detection needs some type of tuning. Okay, so the flip side of that, there is no alert at all. There's nothing going to any analyst or anything like that. This is basically, this is in the ether. This is some of the things that we don't really see. So this is the flip side. True negative. This is basically the normal behavior. This is stuff we don't want to trigger on. Like I don't want that, because then basically we're gonna, why even have rules? Just basically let everything go to triage. That's we don't want that. Okay, so also false negative. This is the worst one, right? Basically, there's no alert and there's malicious behavior that occurred. Basically, nobody knows unless there's a hunt that's going on and identifies that. But basically, that's the gist, right? So I'm a very visual person. For me to understand things, so obviously I have to throw a chart, right?
It's all the case.
And you know, since we're talking about quads, like why not, right? I'm that goofy dad that thinks about weird things, and I would do the same thing if my kid had a quad. So, going back to this to give that visualization of how the quads work. The upper half, false negative, true positive. That's just malicious behavior, period. Right? So if we break it down from the bottom, what's in the bottom half of the quadrants? This is not malicious stuff, right? Okay. So now let's look on the right side. If we look on the right side, something has alerted. Okay. So on the left side, this is the stuff we don't see. There's no alerts. So try to get that wrapped in your mind. I've seen plenty of matrices that basically try to break this out, but in my way, I thought this is probably the best way to give a visual representation, and snapping boop, those lines. Like I'm a Power Ranger now. Go, go, Power Rangers. But so that's what I was trying to do.
Nice.
Anyway, so Paul, what do you think about this?
So yes, with that, you know, side to side, I view that as what is actually reality. You know, the top half is what's evil, the bottom half is what is not. That is reality. The going up and down, that is the test. So what you want is to have as little of the false, positive, and negative as possible, and capture as much as the truths. Just yes. So reality and the up and down is whether or not the test it alerted or it didn't. That's the way I view it. All right. So the first one we're going to break down each of these four directly. First one's going to be true positive. This is whenever, we win. Yeah, the as for blue team, for you black hatters, we thrive on your tears. My favorite cup. It is where we catch them. This is why we do what we do, so that we can find the people that are breaking in and get them out. This is where you start to spin up your IR and get your any kind of the gif of him sprinkling down got me on Discord. Anyways, it is why we're here and it is what we do. Spin up the IR, get them out, get them back to regular operations. All right. So next up is the true negative. All right. This is normal behavior. There is no alert. There is no evil. This is what we want. That means that there's no bad guys and you don't have analysts going crazy. I will say too much of this will drive your systems guys crazy, because usually whenever it's all true negatives, that means something's broke. But your analyst should be happy you're not doing anything. That this is whenever it's you use that Q word, it's too quiet, and then all of a sudden everything breaks loose. So sorry guys in the SOC, I said the Q word. But this is the goal. If everything is secure, they can't get in. So there's no alerts. That is what you want. Next up, the false positive. This is bad. You have an analyst going in there and looking at stuff. It's not awful necessarily, because it's always going to happen. Some genius is going to say, you know what, this legit program named Mimikatz or something strange. It's going to Microsoft and RMMs decide to implement something in a strange way, and all of a sudden what looks like malicious is now normal. So don't take false positives as necessarily a terrible thing. Yes, it is not good, but it is a tuning opportunity. You'll never get rid of all false positives, but you do want to keep them down as far as possible. There is a thing called alert fatigue, alarm fatigue. It has been heavily studied, especially in the medical field. And it is almost as bad as the worst one of you will start ignoring alarms and alerts because you've seen it too often. And then whenever actual evil comes through, you ignore that too. If you're a statistics nerd, math nerd, it's called a type 2 error. So the final evil, the worst thing that you could have, worst result, is a false negative. That means the bad guys are in and you don't know it. They're wrecking house and stealing what they want, watching everything you do, and you can't get them out because you don't know they're there. There will always be blind spots. You will never be able to see everything. And the best way to test for these is a red team. but it's hard to see that you have a blind spot. That's why you're blind to it. The statistics call this a type 1 error. Honestly, as a detection engineer, this is what I avoid the most. I do try to keep down false positives, but I avoid false negatives even more. I get as low false positives as possible while not creating false negatives.
Right. It's definitely a balancing game, right?
Oh,
How
yeah.
broad do you want that detect, or how specific do you want that detect? And there's a balancing game that we always have to do just to ensure that we're getting the best fidelity, but also not bombarding our analysts.
Right. So to filter or not to filter, that is the question. All right. It's a double-edged sword, like what we are just saying. If you filter too much, if you block too much of the alerts, then you will be blind. If you do too little, you will burn out your SOC and you will have them being blind because they won't see it coming. It's just another one of the same alerts. Like, was just said, you got to keep that balance. All right, so let's go with some examples. The true negative. So there's no alert, and the event is a user checks the email. Nobody cares. That it's good that there's no alert. Nobody gets notified or called out of bed to go check that a user's checking their email. True positive. An attacker runs some code on a host and there's an alert. Yes, if somebody is running a remote code execution that they're not authorized to run, I want to get woken up out of bed and go start working on that. Call up the IR. False negative. This is bad. There's no alert. An attacker creates an admin, and I'm sleeping in my bed, happy as can be, while bad guys are, now has a hook in to come back anytime they want and do whatever they want. False positive. This is where I get woken out of bed, and it's the same thing that happens all the time. It is an admin updates. Honestly, most of your false positives are usually some kind of admin privileges, because admins do similar things to hackers most of the time. They're just doing it with authorization. It's the biggest difference.
I was going to point my finger at developers too.
Oh yeah, developers. Yes, they decide to do some strange things.
Yeah, I've had this one developer that basically we had pretty tight egress, and he thought he was slick. I guess he found you could use bits admin to basically talk out and fetch and stuff like that. But we had a detection for that, and we're like, yo, dude, what are you doing? Like, this is not cool.
What's wrong with an open SSH session to the internet?
I'm developing here. I'm trying to find a solution. Okay, man.
Yeah.
Anyway, go ahead, Paul.
So that kind of leads us into some subcategories, and this is why the true positive benign. This is honestly the reason why this talk happened at all, is we had let's say intense debates in the SOC about true positive benign. I am personally on the side that I don't like it. But it is a thing. It is following the letter of the law without the spirit of the law. Quite often, did the alert go off? Was the event that happened in the alert actually happen? So yes, LSAS was checked and they dumped those creds, but it was done by something that was allowed to. It was done by the error reporting system. They're supposed to do that. So it is a true positive on the fact that it matches the rule, but it's benign. This is why I'm not a big fan of it. It came about recently. The first instance I could find of it was about 2020. Microsoft started using it. Honestly, I think it is a way to keep down official false positives. This is my view. This is probably the most controversial part of this show. I know we're supposed to stay away from controversial issues, but this is almost a Vim versus,
Yeah, you took it right out of my mouth. I was waiting. I was
Man.
waiting. This is a Emacs versus Vim like type of thing.
Right. Yeah.
So let's go back to our definitions, right? We kind of harped on the four quadrants, right?
Right.
And when we talk about true positive, it alerted and it's malicious. So when you throw another term, benign, behind that, is basically contradicting the whole cores, the four cores, right? You're saying something is malicious, but it's really not. So what are you really achieving? I have no clue what you're trying to achieve, but it does sound fancy from a statistics perspective.
Right.
So let's move on to like this next part right here. So I wanted to talk to AI, like the all-knowing AI. I'm like, what is your stance, smart being of all the things? And it was kind of like a back and forth, really. It was kind of funny. And so the AI engine I use, because I thought, we're going to do a webcast, so I wanted to make it kind of fun, right? So they have this model called Monday, right? When we talk about Mondays, basically, oh, he's got the Mondays, right? He's all grumpy and what have you. So they basically made this model to be blunt and sarcastic. So it's your blunt and sarcastic assistant. So I'm like, oh, this is going to be entertaining. So I asked about alert disposition, and it harped on like alert context. I'm like, yeah, fair enough. Alert context, right? But what is the context that we're trying to pull out of this? In the end, is really just two things. Is it malicious or not? And who does that? Who makes that determination? The human being, the analyst behind the keyboards, digging at those logs to make that determination. That's the context. What happened around that alert, or before that alert and after that alert, right? What's that context? Is there anything else that looks odd? Yes or no, malicious or not. So I basically kind of go into that a little bit with AI. And in the end is like, what the hell is this true positive benign? So its definition now is it's a label for ego preservation, a clever trick so detection engineers can say, my rule worked. It matched the behavior pattern I built it to detect. The outcome wasn't malicious, but that's not my fault. Don't downgrade my metrics, right? So, like, it's just a weird way to inflate your metrics when the ground truth is it malicious or not? And I mean, I kind of like this because it's kind of like saying you're right. Benign true positive is a defensive sub-label with no operational utility, invented to keep dashboards from crying. I love that. And it's like, I love this. I'm proud of you. You're a philosophical bulldozer in a field of full of fragile detection templates. So I love that because, it's kind of like feeding my ego a little bit. But anyway, so me and Paul kind of slide on the other side of things because you got to have you want to minimize the amount of confusion because in the end, whatever that alert disposition is actually feeds back into our detections, and it's really critical to make sure that there's a clear line.
I mean, I will give the benefit of the doubt. This same technology just told people to put, glue on pizzas, but I agree with it. All right, subcategorization. So what this one hints at is sometimes you have to be more granular than just the four quadrants. You should always start with those four quadrants, but there's a little bit more to get into of, yes, it's malicious, but was it red team or was it, an actual attacker? Um, you know, or was it, a user just being dumb? Do I need to spin up IR? Do I need to remediate this? Does somebody need to get up in the middle of the night to fix this? Those are the kind of things where yes, it is a true positive, but you want to get granular. Those kind of things will help you with your tuning. It gets down to the little things of, it should, especially if you're talking about weighting. If you're doing some kind of RBA, the risk-based analysis, where certain rules have certain weight to it, these kind of things will actually help you with those. But and
Yeah. I'm kind of outlandish. So when I look at you do need some type of subcategorization
right.
per your organization, like whatever makes sense to your team and your engineers. They all have to come in sync. You have to understand what's the definition of all these things. So if you do have subcategorizations, you need to make sure it's well agreed upon and documented. And I say I'm outlandish because when we talk about true positive malicious and true positive red team, my personal opinion when it comes to true positive red team, it's just a verification trigger. It doesn't really give me value that this is feeding into my overall health of my detect. It's basically, okay, I know the detect works, but it's not based off a true threat actor behavior. It's basically just making sure my detect is firing in my sim. That's all it is to me. But
Right.
that's probably controversial as well.
You're not catching a bad guy, you're catching a red team. And there is some evidence that certain vendors are leaning towards, I'm trying to make this as neutral as possible. There are some vendors leaning towards catching red teams, not necessarily catching evil. I'm not going to dig down that road anymore. But talking about definitions, there are several things that you need to ask yourself, like, what is the question like? So whenever you're talking about, whenever you're validating stuff of like malicious or whatever, you can go to the next one.
So I want to add one thing
Oh, I'm sorry.
to that. So when we're talking about that, the one scenario I can think of, like that would really need to like harp on, did we catch the red team, right? Because that's basically going to be a question to the SOC. Did you catch the red team activity? And if you, depending on how you have your categorization set up, uh, it it might be a problem. You'd be like, well, we did, but we called it a false positive. What do you mean false positive? That's malicious activity. We paid these people to come in and do havoc on our network. I hear you, but at the same time, not really, because this is authorized behavior on your network that you approved. This is not a threat actor. This is basically somebody testing our gates. That's all they're doing. So again, controversial, but it's going to be up to the organization to define that, and they need to agree upon that. Go ahead, Paul.
Absolutely. Yep. But so whenever you're talking about the false positive and true positive, there's several questions of like, are you asking the question at when the alert is created? It basically, that is telling you the alert is positive, and that verifies that the machine is working. If you're doing it at where the event is evaluated, somebody sits down and looks at it, does the event actually activity? Is the rule working? Is that where you want to make it? Now, Hal and I, and we've discussed this with a lot of people on the team of, do we analyze, is it once the event is analyzed, we know the intent behind the person, what are they trying to do? Basically, is it malicious? And that is severity validation. Is this a high risk? Is it low risk? Those kind of things. Is it a 99 or is it a 2? uh, you have to define what the question is and where you want that asked at. Of is it malicious? Do you want to know if it's authorized? Do you want to know whether or not it was um, if it leaves you more open? I've even seen some people, would your boss want to know about this? You know, if it is, then it's a true positive. It's all in what question as a company do you want to put down? Uh, so completely changing directions though is a false positive paradox. With that, a lot of people will see the fact that they have all these false positives and get so frustrated at it. False positive paradox says, you know, it looks at these two things called specificity and sensitivity. Specificity means how your false positive rates are. So, you know, how accurate it is as far as false positives. Sensitivity is tuning towards higher true positive. So you're trying to find them, whereas specificity tries to filter out, you know, things you don't want to see. All that to say, if you have a million logs come through at a time and 100 of them are evil, if you are at 99% specificity and sensitivity, you have 10,000 false positives and 99 true positives. Even though it's 99%, because, and it looks like all you're getting is false positives. It makes no sense. Why are you looking through all these false positives for these tiny amount of true positives? You found almost all the true positives though. It looks like it's unbalanced. To give you a realistic view of our SOC, right now, per day, on average, we are getting 18 billion logs every day, 600 billion logs every month ish, give or take a couple billion.
Give or take a couple billion.
Just a couple billion. Now, I think we're on the high end and we are always working at it. We have 32 alerts a day. Now that is a lot. We have it averages about 3 true positives a day. So it looks like only 10% less, or just over 10%, no, under 10% of our alerts end up finding evil. But if you look at it, that is 99.99999, 11 nines percent of what is it, true negatives. So it is, honestly, we are doing fairly well whenever it comes to the specificity, and I think that we're doing well on sensitivity as well. We actually, you know, we review our stuffs, and especially if there's something found, we review what happened to it. We review other people there, Justin Brown. I just saw your thing. Who would hack into us? It's tried, but
Gotcha.
but gotcha. Yeah, go back up to that. Oh, you caught me. Anyways, the people that we watch, you know, if there is the rare, you know, the true positives, we look at everything around it and try to see all the connections, and we go back and look at those false negatives, and honestly, there's not a lot of them. So I think we're doing fairly well on that. And that all leads us back to, you know, the measure, how you actually calculate this up.
Yeah. So in the beginning, we talked about the detection engineering lifecycle. So now we're buttoning it all up together. This is basically the end of the lifecycle when we talk about measuring it, right? So the detection has been put out in production. We talk about all those different types of cycles for the alert lifecycle and what have you, and then the alert disposition. That's like one of the critical points. There's other ways to define if a detection is doing well or not well, right? So looking for high volume, right? We talk about that false positive rate. We talk about no volume, right? Is something broken? We probably need to go fix that if we're not getting anything from it. Or maybe maybe it's not the detection itself. Maybe the telemetry that we're ingesting is clogged up somewhere and we need to go after that and fix that. And then, we talk about the true positive ratios and the false positive ratios and your detection coverage. And some people refer to that as like detection drift. There's lots of different ways you can slice and dice numbers, right? It's just statistics, and whatever you can come up with is a good way to try to define if your detection is good. One way there's a couple of other ways. Basically, you can look at your overall health of your detection health, and you look at all the tickets that you have in the past, and what are they related to, and like what's the ratios there. Or if you want to slice it up a little bit more, you can use the MITRE TTPs, and let's look at the tactic. Each of these tactics, how are we doing? How are we performing? How's this look? Like earlier we talked about you want to stop them higher up in that chain. So if we have like really good detections right in the front, that's going to help a lot. But things can slip through. So we got to have those additional layers in the back end to help us give us that attention. We got to get after this stuff. So that's. Did you have anything you want to add there, Paul?
No, I think that summed it up fairly well. Of definitely have all the coverage. Unfortunately, the early detections are usually less fidelity as the later ones, because that's whenever they start making bigger moves is the later. But at the same time, it is always important to catch earlier.
Yeah, 100%. So summing it all up, we kind of gave this whole story of how this all works. So we talked about the detection engineering lifecycle, those 7 phases that brings a detection to life. And then we talked about after that detections to life, basically how's that alert lifecycle work, right? When something actually triggers and gets in front of an analyst, or whatever mechanism that you're using to do that initial blocking and tackling. But in the end, there's going to be a disposition, the alert disposition. Is this thing malicious or not? That's important metric. So using the quad cores or the core quads, however you want to call it, is a surefire way to eliminate any type of confusion. Because did it alert? Okay. Is it malicious? And if it's not malicious, then it's not malicious. And then, terminology. Terminology can be used, but it can be confused when we start doing subcategorization. Make sure if you use subcategorization, you might want to avoid certain terms that are conflicting, but have it well documented for your team and agreed upon, and go forth and do good things. Can't find my mouse.
Did you just land the plane?
He landed.
It has landed.
All right.
Questions, the last one. That's always the last slide.
All right. So first of all, Hal and Paul, thank you so much for sharing it. For you watching, if you haven't checked in yet for Hackett, if you're watching the recording, what that means is during the live webcast in Discord, if you engage in Discord, then we give you credit for it, and we send rewards for 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 of how many webcasts you've attended. So if you've done that, thank you so much. And we've already mailed out a lot of rewards. So if you want to tell your fellow attendees, it's real. It's real,
y'all.
Yeah, it's real. All right. So Hal and Paul, what we're going to do is invite the rest of the SOC team to join, but we're going to give you your chance to do final thoughts. We're going to officially end our time, and then we're going to stick around for some Q&A. So Hal, if you could sum up everything you just talked about in the last hour, what would your final thought be?
Communication is key. You got to make sure that everybody's agreed upon on terminology, and I think that's that big one.
Okay. Paul, your final takeaway?
Definitely the line up on terminology, define the questions that you're trying to answer, and stick to simple.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us today on this Black Hills Information Security webcast. If you need our SOC services, you know where to find us. And it will be Hal and Paul and many others that will be doing the work for you to help you stay secure, because we care about your security. We want to earn your trust, and we want to keep your trust. And with that, all right, so that is the end of the official webcast. If the rest of the SOC team could join us, and Megan, if you could add everybody else, we'll stick around for some Q&A. I actually need the other people to help with Q&A because
Yeah.
I don't always understand the questions that are asked. So I'll start it off with Troy. Do you see any questions that you want to ask Hal and Paul that weren't necessarily addressed? And if anyone else has questions, you can ask inside Zoom or you can ask inside Discord, and we'll get to your questions the best we possibly can.
Yeah, sure. One that just came in off the press. What are your thoughts on not enough information to conclude as a disposition? Feels like feels like a third of the dispositions from our MDR partner wind up here.
That one's a hard one. Now, I've been
right out the
considering.
gate. Bam.
Oh, we got another good one lined up for you too.
Oh, great. I've been considering us putting that in because there's sometimes you don't have the information, and a lot of those end up just being labeled as a false positive. I mean, it's a positive because it came out, but you can't call it a true positive because you don't know it's there. One discussion I had recently is it is very easily to discover a true positive. Those are usually very blatant. It is whenever you have a false positive that it's questionable, you keep looking, trying to find that one piece of evidence. You will never prove for 100% a false positive.
Yeah, a kind of one way to also look at it is depending on your organization, what they have set up, and if it's condoned to do, sometimes you could reach out to the user itself, or at least the manager's user, or the user's manager, to identify like what's going on. Is this normal for your department to use this type of utility or what have you, and then try to get that little additional context to try to identify if this is bad or not.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, two things that come to mind. First of all, this seems like the question was geared towards like MDR partners. So like think like a third party is probably saying, hey, this happened and so on and so forth. So it's not the way I kind of look at this question is geared towards another third party entity telling you something happened. So one thing is potentially maybe the data sources are not as accurate, or you're not getting the right telemetry in the first place. So you don't have the adequate enough of telemetry to answer the question of what is the intent of the detect, and do we have enough to answer that question? And then the other part is, I think you were alluding to, how is potentially unwanted applications, right? That's that like that area, that criteria where it's like, okay, is PS exec good? Yeah, it's good. But it's also bad. Yeah, it's bad, right? Like it's like, is this used in your environment?
Both sides
and that one team seems to be
Right.
potentially unwanted applications, and then insider threat type activity are those, like, that's where that gray area really just like evolves in my experience, right?
Right. That's one reason why you have to define the what you're asking. You have to say, are you basing it off of your set of approved software? And if it's on there and it's not on the approved software, that makes it malicious.
A big takeaway from all of this is basically just, if it is coming from a third party, like your company's telling you these things that they don't have enough information to make a ruling on it, you should probably want to question, like they said, whether or not you're sending them all the relevant info you should be sending them. And also, you want to keep open communication with them with what software you currently are approved using in your environment. And if possible, even like administrators as they come and go. If you could let them know that kind of stuff, it makes the fuzzy administrator activity things become more transparent as well.
So something to also add on to that, right? So I kind of missed the part where from an MDR perspective, like the MDR provider is not providing enough information or context. So depending on that provider, I mean, you should have, I'm not gonna say that you should, but it should be recommended that you have access to your own data. You should be able to be looking at this stuff yourself, right? If they provide some type of customer portal that you can do your own type of analysis and try to get to the ground truth of what's going on. So you have that full context and you can basically say, oh, this is just Bob. He's always like playing with new tools or whatever. So like you don't want to blind yourself if you're using an MDR. You want to be able to have a lot of communication with your MDR, and there shouldn't be any blinds or blockers in your way to help you do your operation of business.
That was very thorough. Well
That's
done.
very
Will, did you see any questions that need to be addressed?
Yeah, we all felt backstage. This one would be a great question for Hal. Hal, what do you think is an acceptable rate of false positives?
Oh God, like so.
Saw that one too.
That's a hard one, right? I don't have like a number, right? I really tried to like figure out what would be a good number for this, and it really just depends on the organization and what their tooling is and their telemetry and where they're at in their SOC maturity. All those different things kind of come into play. I mean, the real ultimate goal that we all want to do is basically have 0 false positives, but that's like extremely hard to do. Like this is like, I don't know, you're probably the 0.0001% that if you can get there, then you're amazing. We should talk.
Only Sith steal in absolutes, Hal.
Yeah, absolutely.
As low as possible while not creating false negatives. That's my answer.
No, for sure.
Basically, yeah, you have to weigh the risk of how much you want to filter out that false positives. There are certain rules you're going to make that are just going to be inherently noisy.
Yeah.
Like, for example, somebody mentioned earlier, PS exec. There's a lot of companies out there that want you to alert when somebody's using it because they don't normally let their employees. There are also other companies that use it 8 million times a day. So if you do global rules in your organization and you have like rules that are set to just run across every client, rules like that then become inherently noisy. So it's like it becomes a huge balancing act of, well, yeah, we know this is normal activity for these clients, but then what happens the one day that an outsider does get in and uses PS exec to do what he needs to do in your environment? So in a perfect world, you do want that to be a 0%, but the reality is you're never going to get there. And it's a constant balancing act, and the answer is going to be different for every organization and every person, depending on your basically what your risk allowance is.
very thorough answer as well.
All right.
Not surprised.
Sure. Tom, do you see a question? Or
I would say
Deb?
Tom. I think Tom has a question.
All right. So one of the questions from Discord, it's someone asking, where does end user behavior analytics come into play to influence true positives, etc.? They gave an example, such as a receptionist running PowerShell versus a developer running PowerShell. So that helps clarify the question more.
Yeah.
So
Who wants to tackle that one? If not,
I can probably weigh in a little bit on that. So UBA and entity behavior analytics, what have you, it is important to take that into consideration with regards to processes that are unique to an organization. So if your receptionist, as an example, has a process that she has to run for some type of reporting criteria, it's potential that she is running PowerShell. But it's all organizational based upon processes that are unique to the organization. So it does need to be weighed in there. It's important to see what's happening in a particular process. So if that helps.
yeah. So to pile on to Brian a little bit, when we're talking about UEBA, I mean, basically we're talking about baselining activities. How far can you get granularly with that? You want to get down to the user and the host if you can, right? So the more specific that you can be for a baselining opportunity to see what's normal and abnormal for the user is going to be a big contributor, right? So if Sally from the reception desk or whatever is running PowerShell for the very first time, like ever, like that's pretty bad. That should be like looked at.
And I will say that UEBA is like in the beginning of the detect. It is how the detect is run, whereas the true positive is the outcome. So if you're asking, like, if you're using UBA, does that affect your true positive, false positive? Not directly. It may raise your rate if you have a good system set up. You may be able to find those true positives more often, but it's not directly related.
Yeah, recently, I'm always worried that I'm the weakest link here at Black Hills, that I will be the reason that we're compromised. So I assume compromised at all time. And so my computer hiccuped one day and I was like, let's just reach out to the SOC. And there's like a period of time where you guys were digging all through my stuff. And I was like, that's cool. But I also wanted to be like, so tell me a little bit about myself. What kind of user am I? Like
We're not intrusive.
I can tell you I've never seen a ticket for you.
That's
If that makes you feel good.
That's very good.
And we have had employees that we have had tickets for.
Way to call me out there, Will.
Oh,
Hey, whoa.
No, it wasn't me.
we do try to be
Not
very-
alone, Deb.
That's any org. Like any org,
yeah.
you're gonna have people internally, even within your own system, like security people. Like nobody is safe from being compromised. A saying my dad used to tell me that I really loved is, all you need to do to give a hacker to get into your system is two things: time and desire. If they have those two things, they're gonna get into anything.
Also, for clarity, we have not been compromised with Black Hills information.
No.
Just for clarity.
Just little stuff. Like,
All right. Any other questions before we wrap up? All right, Hal. So you got a webcast coming up in a couple weeks.
Yes,
We
sir.
dropped the link in for it. We want people to come back for that. And then, Hal, did you mention your training class?
Yeah, so it's Detection Engineering Unleashed. It should be out at the end of the year.
Yeah. So here's what I'd love for you to do. If you have any questions that you were like, I really would love this to be addressed by Hal in the training class that he's got coming up on Detections Engineering, go ahead and ask those questions in the chat, and then Hal will harvest those questions and then it will help him make sure that he's teaching what people want to know. All right. And then Hal and Paul, if you have any time to go through the Discord server at some point in the future and just go through any questions that you might have seen or see, and then respond to them when you have the time, that would be amazing. And then for everyone that joined us today, thank you so much. Deb, what are your final thoughts today?
Ooh, final thoughts. Well, I always like to thank people for showing up. There's so much content out there, and we know your time is valuable. So thank you for choosing to spend an hour and a half with us. Yeah, we love being here, and we'll be here next Thursday and every Thursday until the end of time.
Except me, I won't be here next Thursday.
Oh, not next Thursday. That's right.
I'll be at RSA.
Dang it.
Pray for me. Pray for
Be
me.
safe.
So I'm hosting next Thursday. Is this how you're telling me?
Yes,
Okay,
Deb, you're
okay,
hosting
okay.
next Thursday.
Okay, good to know.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much. It is time to kill it with fire, Megan. Megan, kill it. Kill it with fire, Megan.
Feel it. Bye, everyone.